Hello everyone, welcome to K Diagnostics. Dio here. Today we have a 2007 Chrysler Sebring with a 2.4 liter. This is the car that we worked on a couple hours ago. It had two issues. We did the thermostat housing. It was leaking. We replaced the thermostat housing. So now we're gonna do the next job, which is replacing the valve cover gasket. So I'm gonna bring you over here in the engine bay so I can show you the leak around the valve cover, and then we're gonna replace it. So let's look at this leak and then replace this valve cover gasket. Alright, so I'm here under the hood. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove this engine cover. Alright, so the engine cover is removed. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna replace the valve cover gasket. It's not really leaking on the outside, but the spark plugs are getting wet. So the spark plug tube gaskets are leaking. So this is pretty straightforward and pretty easy to do. There are bolts around the valve cover itself. So all these 8mm bolts you see here are the bolts that hold the valve cover onto the cylinder head. And we have to remove all of them around the valve cover so that we can remove it. And we also have to disconnect this coil, these ignition coils, and remove them so that the valve cover can come out. And we have more bolts in here. 1, 2, and then there's a third one, I think, down there too. Alright, so I'm gonna start by disconnecting this fuel line. Okay, so I'm gonna get that out of the way. I'm just gonna sit it on the side there. And now I'm gonna disconnect these coils. Let's disconnect one at a time. So we got that out of the way. And now we're gonna undo these coils here. Do you guys see how wet? I mean, these coils are slightly wet. I don't know if the camera is picking that up, but that's the oil leaking past the spark plug tube seals. Right here. Okay, so we got this coil out of the way. So now I'm gonna remove this PCV tube. And then we're just gonna put all this out of the way. Alright, so now that we got the ignition coils removed, we're just gonna push this wiring harness on the side here so we can get access to these valve cover bolts right here. Okay, so there are 3 bolts on the side here. There's this one, that one over there, and the other one here. This one right here. And then we have a couple more right here in front of the engine. So I'm gonna pull this PCV tube out, and then I will remove this plastic bolt here. So these are the plastic bolts for the engine cover. I'm just gonna sit them over there. Let's remove this one also. I'm just gonna sit them right here. Alright, so now we can remove the valve cover bolt. The valve cover bolts are 8mm bolts. Alright, so I undid all the bolts. Our valve cover should be able to come out right now. I'm just double checking to make sure that they're all undone all the way. It looks like they all are. So I'm gonna get a little pry bar so I can pry this valve cover off. So I'm gonna use this to pry this valve cover. So just right there, just pry it gently, gently, right there, and I should be able to lift the valve cover, and here it comes. I am gonna set it right here on our cart here, and the leak was right here on this spark plug tubes. It's because I didn't remove the spark plugs so I could show them to you. The spark plugs are completely white on this motor. I'll probably take a couple of them off just to show you right here. I mean, the gasket has completely flattened. I mean, it's completely worn out. I mean, you guys won't be able to see that on camera, but I mean, as I'm actually touching it right here, it's really flat. It's not supposed to be completely flat and it's hardened too. Anyways, so we got the valve cover removed. Alright, so now the next step is gonna be, we're gonna clean up the entire gasket surface here on the cylinder head. Once I get all this cleaned, and then we're gonna put a new gasket on the valve cover. And after I install the gasket on the valve cover, I'll bring you guys back up so we can install this valve cover. I don't know if you guys will be able to see the spark plugs there in the hole. You won't be able to see, but can you see how wet the spark plug is over there? See that? They're completely wet. I will actually remove the spark plugs too and clean the spark plug hole. And we're also gonna replace the spark plugs. So I will do that as well. But I'm gonna replace the seal first and then I'll clean up the hole. Or I can do the spark plugs later, but let's replace the valve cover gasket first. So I will clean up and then bring you guys back up. Alright, so now I'm gonna replace the valve cover gasket. I need to get this old gasket removed. Man, this gasket is completely hardened. It's just dried out. Wow. Look at this. Man, wow, can you hear that? This gasket is rubber, but you see how hard it has become? Yeah. No wonder it was leaking. And you have to be careful while you're doing this because this valve cover is plastic, because you don't want to crack it. Alright, so the outer gasket is completely removed. So now I'm going to remove the inner gasket for the spark plug tubes. Man, this thing's completely dry. I hope the camera is picking that because this is unbelievable. Woo. Oh crap. I'm not breaking the valve cover, so I'm breaking the gasket. And you have to be careful doing this because you can cut yourself really easily. And the gasket has become like a piece of plastic. Man, do you hear that? And if you're not careful, you can cut yourself big time. So be careful while you do this. Alright, okay, so the gasket has been removed. So now I'm gonna wipe this down. Oh, this sucker here is still on. So you gotta make sure there's no dirt here on this gasket groove. So I'm wiping down the gasket groove. Alright, so now let's bring the new gasket in the picture here. You see how the new one is supposed to look? Watch. It's a rubber gasket. You see how flexible it is? But look at this. See how hard this one is. So that gasket was completely bad. So now let's install our new gasket. So now I'm just pressing on the gasket to make sure it's sitting completely on its groove. So the gasket is installed. So now let's install the spark plug tube gasket. Already. So the gasket is installed. The good thing about this type of gasket is that it also holds the bolts on. So even if I flip it over, the gasket is not gonna fall. So right there. Perfect. So now let's go back to the engine bay so we can install this valve cover. Alright, so I did clean the gasket surfaces here, right there and along the cylinder head. So now the valve cover is ready to be installed. Let's see how this is gonna go. I'm gonna try to do this one-handed while I'm holding the camera. Let's find out. Just gonna try to sit it right there, and there it is. Easy peasy. So now I'm gonna start these bolts. Actually, it's always good to start them by hand first. Make sure they go in by hand. Because the last thing you want to do is cross threading these tiny bolts here. Alright, sometimes these electrical connectors or the electrical wire get caught between the valve cover and the head. So you have to make sure that no wire is caught between the valve cover and the cylinder head. Alright, so I got all of them started. So now I'm gonna bring my power tool to tighten all of them. Start with the center bolt. Now I'm gonna come back here. I'm gonna go over there. I'm crisscrossing them, so crisscross them so that all the bolts so that the gasket can be flattened evenly. I mean, once you've tightened them in a crisscross pattern, and then you can just go back and make sure they're all tightened. So that's pretty much what I'm doing right now. I'm making sure they are all tightened. And again, they are 8mm bolts, so they're very tiny bolts. You actually kind of just want to get them snug there, because they're not really too tight. Alright, right there. You actually don't need to, I mean, you can torque this if you want, but I just like to go by hand and feel. I can't just tell. But I believe the torque for this is 140 inch-pound. So you can use a torque wrench, or you can just be gentle with them and get them, all of them snug, then you should be good to go. So I got all the bolts on. Now I'm gonna install these plastic bolts here for the engine cover. So we had one at this corner and then another one here. There goes the air compressor. And then another one at this corner. And another one here. Perfect. Perfecto. So what's next? So at this point, the next step would be installing our ignition coils. But we're not gonna do that step yet because we're gonna replace our spark plugs. So I'll get spark plugs so we can replace them, and then we will install our ignition coils. Alright, so now let's get these spark plugs replaced. Alright, so here comes our spark plug. You guys see how wet this spark plug is? See the oil? So this is the oil leaking past the valve cover from the bed spark plug gaskets that we just replaced. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean this spark plug tube and I will install the new spark plug. We're actually gonna do the same thing on all 4 of them. Alright, so I cleaned up the spark plug tubes and I installed the new spark plugs. So now I'm going to tighten the spark plugs so we can install our ignition coils. Alright, so I got the spark plugs tightened down. So now what do you think the next step is? Yes, you got it. The next step is installing the ignition coils. Just gonna seat all of them right in there. And then we're gonna bring in these tiny torque bolts here. Alright, so what's next? Now the next step is reconnecting the electrical connector for these ignition coils, right? So right here. Okay, now I'm gonna reconnect this fuel supply line. Right there. What else? Are we missing anything, guys? What else do we have to reconnect? So now let's bring our PCV tube back here in the picture. Now let's connect it right there. What else? Let's connect this back up. That's connected. Okay, I think we're good, guys. We are done. So I am gonna go back inside the car and start it, and then we're gonna observe everything, and that should be the end. So I will go inside the car and start it. So what do you think, guys? The car is running. It sounds good. Let's look around the valve cover to see if there's any oil leaks. Look at that shiny blue gasket there. Nothing. Everything looks dry. No leaks back there. I think this is fixed. It sounds good. It's got a new belt, new valve cover gasket. This engine is happy right now. So, alright, so I'm gonna go back inside the car, turn off the car. We will install the engine cover after that, and then we're gonna wrap up this video. Alright, so here is our engine cover. I'm gonna sit it right here. Alright, so our engine cover is installed. I'm gonna end this right here. So this is how you remove and replace a valve cover gasket on this 2007 Chrysler Sebring with a 2.4 liter. I hope you like this video. If you do, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why. If this is your first time here, subscribe to my YouTube channel, K Diagnostics. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. And while you're down there, don't forget to ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. Once again, thanks for watching. See you next time.